You think your husband appreciates your sacrifices until his promotion turns him into someone who calls you a freeloader at his boss's dinner party. I'm a 63-year-old woman who spent 38 years supporting my husband's career, raising our children, and managing our home, only to be humiliated in front of strangers by the man I built a life with. What I did next taught him exactly what a freeloader looks like, and I have zero regrets. Let me tell you exactly what happened. My husband Richard got promoted to Senior Vice President 3 months ago, and within 6 weeks he called me a freeloader in front of his new colleagues because I don't earn a paycheck. When I stopped doing everything I'd done for free for nearly 4 decades, he learned very quickly what my unpaid labor was actually worth. By the time he begged me to come back, I'd already decided I was done being invisible. I met Richard when I was 24. I was working as a legal secretary with plans to go to law school. He was 26, ambitious, focused, already climbing the corporate ladder at a manufacturing firm. We got married within a year. I was supposed to start law school that fall, but Richard got transferred to another state for a better position. He asked me to wait just 1 year so we could get settled. I said yes because I loved him and believed we were building something together. That 1 year became 2, then 5, then never. Our daughter Sarah was born when I was 27. Our son Michael came 2 years later. Richard's career required constant attention. Long hours, business trips, client dinners, weekend golf meetings. Someone had to manage everything else, and that someone was me. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd go back to my plans eventually. I told myself partnership meant sometimes one person's career took priority. I raised our children alone most days. I packed lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences and coached soccer and stayed up late helping with science projects while Richard worked late or traveled. I managed every detail of our household: groceries, repairs, bills, appointments, social calendar. I coordinated his mother's care when she got sick. I planned every vacation. I entertained his colleagues at dinner parties where I smiled and served and made him look good. I did all of this without complaint because I believed we were a team. Richard's career flourished. Every promotion meant more responsibility, more travel, more pressure. He'd come home exhausted and I'd have dinner ready. He'd have early meetings and I'd have his suits cleaned and his coffee made. He'd need to schmooze clients and I'd organize perfect dinner parties on 2 days' notice. I was his support system, his infrastructure, the invisible foundation that allowed him to focus entirely on advancement. The children grew up. Sarah graduated college and moved across the country for her career. Michael got married and settled 2 states away. Richard kept climbing. I kept supporting. We never discussed what I'd given up. We never talked about law school or my career or what I might have become. It was just understood that his work was our priority and my role was to make his work possible. Then 3 months ago, Richard got promoted to Senior Vice President. Big title, big raise, big corner office. Suddenly he was in meetings with C-suite executives. Suddenly he had a secretary and an expense account and invitations to exclusive events. Suddenly he was someone important and I was still just the wife who managed his dry cleaning. The change was immediate. He started making comments about money, about how hard he worked, about how much pressure he was under. He'd come home and complain about colleagues who didn't pull their weight. He'd talk about people at the company who were coasting, who weren't earning their positions. He never said it directly, but I felt the implication. He was the one working. He was the one earning. Everyone else was just along for the ride. 2 months ago, his new boss invited us to a dinner party. Exclusive. Important. Richard's first social event with the senior leadership team. He told me to wear something impressive, to be charming, to make a good impression. I spent 2 days preparing. I bought a new dress. I got my hair done. I researched every person who'd be there so I could make intelligent conversation. I showed up ready to be the perfect corporate wife one more time. The dinner was at an expensive steakhouse downtown. 12 people around a long table. Richard's boss and his wife, 3 other VPs and their spouses, everyone talking about markets and strategy and company politics. I smiled and nodded and asked appropriate questions. I was performing the role I perfected over 38 years. Then Richard's boss made a joke about his wife's shopping habits, something about how expensive it was to keep her happy. The other men laughed. One of them said something about the cost of having a wife with too much free time. More laughter. Richard laughed too, louder than necessary, eager to fit in with his new peer group. Then he said it. He looked at me and said to the table, "At least your wives contribute something. Mine's basically been a freeloader for 40 years. He said it with a smile, like it was a joke. Like humiliating me in front of strangers was just harmless banter. Everyone went quiet. His boss's wife looked uncomfortable. I sat there with my water glass halfway to my mouth, frozen. I didn't make a scene. I set down my glass carefully. I excused myself to the restroom. I stood in that bathroom staring at my reflection, this 63-year-old woman in an expensive dress, and something inside me just went cold and clear. I'd given up law school for him. I'd raised his children while he built his career. I'd managed every single detail of his life for 38 years so he could focus on becoming successful. And he just called me a freeloader. I went back to the table. I smiled. I finished dinner. I made polite conversation. Richard didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to realize what he'd said was wrong. On the drive home, he talked about how well the evening went, how impressed his boss seemed, how important these relationships were. I said nothing. When we got home, I went to our bedroom and pulled out a notebook. I started writing down everything I did, every single task I performed, every invisible job that kept our household running: grocery shopping, meal planning, cooking, cleaning, laundry, bills, scheduling, repairs, yard work, pet care. Social obligations, family coordination. The list went on for 6 pages. 6 pages of unpaid labor that allowed Richard to work 60-hour weeks without worrying about anything else. The next morning, Richard left for work at 7, like always. He expected coffee ready, breakfast made, his gym bag packed. I did none of it. When he came into the kitchen confused, I handed him the notebook. I told him to read it carefully. Then I told him, since I was apparently a freeloader, I'd be stopping all freeloading activities immediately. If he was the only one earning money, he could be the only one spending it on everything our life required. He laughed. He actually laughed. He said I was being ridiculous. He said he hadn't meant it the way I took it. He said I was overreacting to a joke. I told him very calmly that I wasn't joking at all. I told him I was done being invisible. I was done being taken for granted. I was done performing unpaid labor for someone who thought so little of my contributions that he'd humiliate me publicly. He said I was being dramatic. He had a meeting. He left without coffee or breakfast, still not taking me seriously. I spent that day doing exactly what I said I'd do: nothing. I didn't grocery shop. I didn't plan dinner. I didn't pick up his dry cleaning. I didn't call the landscaper. I didn't do any of the 1,000 small tasks that made his life function smoothly. He came home at 7, expecting dinner. There was no dinner. The kitchen was exactly as he'd left it that morning. He asked what was going on. I told him freeloaders don't cook. He could order takeout. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind, then ordered pizza. We ate in silence. He kept glancing at me, waiting for me to break, to admit I was just making a point. I didn't break. The next morning there was no coffee, no breakfast. His gym bag wasn't packed. His suit wasn't picked up from the cleaners. He started getting annoyed. He said this was childish. I said freeloaders are childish, so I was just living up to his description. He left angry. Day 3, we ran out of milk. Then bread. Then coffee. Richard asked when I was going grocery shopping. I said I wasn't. I told him if he needed groceries, he could get them himself. He said he didn't have time. I said that wasn't my problem anymore. He went to work without breakfast again. Day 4, he had no clean clothes. Everything was in the hamper. He asked where his blue shirt was. I said probably dirty. He said I needed to do laundry. I said freeloaders don't do laundry. He could do it himself or take it out. He wore a wrinkled shirt to work rather than admit he didn't know how to use the washing machine. By day 7, the house was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing, mail stacked on the counter, no food in the refrigerator. Richard's mother called asking why we'd missed Sunday dinner. Richard didn't know I'd cancelled it because I wasn't cooking or coordinating family obligations anymore. He had to call her back and make excuses. Day 10, he missed a dentist appointment because I didn't remind him. He forgot his boss's wife's birthday because I wasn't managing the gift calendar. He showed up to a client dinner underdressed because I didn't tell him the dress code. Little cracks started appearing in his perfectly managed life, and he started to panic. He tried apologizing. He said he was sorry about the freeloader comment. He said he didn't mean it. I told him, apologies don't undo 38 years of being taken for granted. He said I was punishing him. I said I was just giving him the opportunity to see what his life looked like without a freeloader managing every detail. Week 3, Richard was falling apart. He'd gained weight from eating takeout every night. He'd missed 2 important calls because I wasn't managing his schedule. His mother was furious about missed family obligations. He'd run out of clean underwear and had to buy new packs rather than figure out the laundry. He'd forgotten our grandson's birthday and had to overnight a gift. Every single thing I'd done invisibly for decades was suddenly glaringly obvious by its absence. He came home one evening and found me reading in the living room. He sat down across from me. He looked exhausted. He said he didn't realize how much I did. I said clearly. He said he couldn't keep living like this. I said then he had a decision to make. He asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted him to understand that my 38 years of unpaid labor had been a contribution, not freeloading. I wanted him to recognize that his success was built on my sacrifices. I wanted him to admit that calling me a freeloader in front of his colleagues was cruel and wrong. Most importantly, I wanted him to understand that I didn't owe him continued service just because I'd provided it for free for 4 decades. He said he understood. I told him understanding wasn't enough. I wanted change, real change. I told him I'd resume managing the household under new conditions. We'd hire a housekeeper for the deep cleaning. He'd handle his own laundry and dry cleaning. He'd cook 2 nights a week. He'd manage his own schedule and appointments. He'd take over organizing family obligations. He'd acknowledge my contributions publicly, starting with calling his boss and apologizing for the freeloader comment. He balked at that last one. He said it would be humiliating. I said good. I said I'd been humiliated in front of those people, and now he could explain why. He said it would hurt his professional reputation. I said my unpaid labor for 38 years had built his professional reputation, and if he wanted to keep it intact, he'd make this right. It took him 3 days to call his boss. I don't know exactly what he said, but his boss's wife called me afterward. She said Richard had apologized for his comments and explained that he'd since learned how much his wife actually contributed to his success. She said she respected him for owning his mistake. She also said she'd wanted to say something at that dinner but didn't want to cause a scene. I thanked her and thought about all the times women stay silent to keep the peace. Richard hired a housekeeper. He started doing his own laundry, badly at first, then better. He cooked dinner twice a week, simple things, but he cooked. He took over planning his mother's visits. Slowly, grudgingly, he started participating in the life we'd built, instead of just benefiting from my invisible labor. But something had changed in me that couldn't be undone. I'd spent 38 years being a support system, and in one sentence at a dinner party, Richard had revealed what he actually thought of me. He'd shown me that all my sacrifices, all my unpaid work, all my abandoned dreams were worthless in his eyes. I was just a freeloader, someone who contributed nothing while he carried everything. I resumed some of my household duties, but not all of them. I started taking classes at the community college. Not law school, I'm 63, but literature classes I'd always wanted to take. I joined a book club. I volunteered at the library. I started building something for myself instead of just maintaining the infrastructure of Richard's success. Richard doesn't complain anymore. He doesn't make jokes about freeloaders. He thanks me now when I cook dinner, when I manage the bills, when I coordinate family events. But there's a distance between us that wasn't there before. He destroyed something with that one comment, something I'm not sure can be repaired. Sometimes he asks if we're okay. I tell him we're functional. He asks if I forgive him. I tell him I don't think about it in terms of forgiveness. I think about it in terms of clarity. He gave me clarity about how he saw me, and that clarity changed how I see myself. I'm not his support staff. I'm not his infrastructure. I'm not a freeloader. I'm a woman who gave up her own dreams to support someone else's, and I'm done apologizing for wanting that recognized. My daughter Sarah called after Richard told her what happened. She said she was proud of me. She said she'd watched me disappear into his success for her entire childhood and was glad I was finally standing up for myself. My son Michael was less supportive. He said I was being hard on his father, that Richard had apologized, that marriage meant forgiveness. I told Michael that marriage also meant respect, and that his father had forgotten that for 38 years. I'm 63 years old now. I spent my entire adult life in service to someone else's ambitions. I don't regret raising my children. I don't regret building a home. But I do regret believing that sacrifice without acknowledgement was noble. I regret accepting invisible as my natural state. I regret not demanding respect decades ago. Richard learned what a freeloader actually is when I stopped doing everything for free. He learned that unpaid labor is still labor. He learned that contributions don't require paychecks to matter. He learned these lessons because I forced him to live without me, to struggle through the basic tasks I'd handled seamlessly for decades. Some people think I should have just accepted his apology and moved on. They say marriages require compromise and forgiveness. They say I'm holding a grudge over one comment, but they don't understand that it wasn't one comment. It was 38 years of being taken for granted, culminating in one public humiliation that made the disrespect impossible to ignore. I sleep fine at night. Richard does his own laundry now and understands what the washing machine settings mean. He knows where we keep the garbage bags. He can cook basic meals. He manages his own calendar. These aren't extraordinary skills. They're basic adult competencies he never had to develop because I did everything for him. Our marriage survived, but it's different now. I'm different. I'm not the invisible support system anymore. I'm a person with my own interests and my own time and my own value that exists independent of what I provide him. If he'd said those words to me 10 years ago, I might have swallowed the hurt and kept performing. But at 63, I'm too old and too tired to pretend disrespect doesn't damage things permanently. Richard got his promotion and his corner office and his new title. I got my clarity and my boundaries and my self-respect back. I don't know if that's a fair trade after 38 years, but it's the trade I made. And when I look at my life now, with my college classes and my book club and my volunteer work, I see someone who exists for herself, not just in service to someone else's success. That's worth more than any apology. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? And do not forget to subscribe to Golden Years Diary for more stories like this.